Good evening and welcome to this CASA and Gunner Short webinar on analysis of the US presidential election. Also hooked on to this webinar is the Clause Network. So to that extent, this is a joint webinar of Clause, CASA and Gunner Short. We just finished with the US presidential election and it has its own ramifications and has its own ripples all over the world. It is already there. And to discuss everything about this with a special emphasis on what happens with India and our relations and India's role in global affairs, I have with me a very erudite and knowledgeable panel. Let me welcome them first. At the outset, on the top right is Brigadier Arun Sehgal, who I consider a virtual, master at US-India relationships and in studying USA. Then, of course, I have bottom left Ambassador Anil Trigunayat, who's been writing extensively on this topic. And again, his views are something which I always held dear. And of course, diagonally across is General Gautam Murthy, who's been the founder of CASA and who's always there on these webinars. Unfortunately, today, General Hasnain won't join us because he's committed in a disaster management review meeting at the Ministry of Home Affairs. So let me start the evening. First, having welcomed everyone, I'd like to put a few things across and then I'll give about 10 minutes to each speaker. All of you can put out your views the way you want it. And please don't get restricted by what I say. And then we'll go through the next round based on what you talk. And then, of course, we'll take questions. Right. What we see today is the 47th president of USA, Mr. Donald Trump, is going to be a real strong president since he's not only got a strong majority, he's also got the popular mandate, plus the Senate is in his hand. And slowly, the Republicans are inching towards the House of Representatives. If that happens, my God, he's going to be one of the strongest presidents I've ever known, at least in my lifetime. Okay. The reactions from the globe are very interesting. And it suggests that everyone is looking forward to something because Mr. Trump is, you can't predict him. He's as unpredictable as ever. And that's what we know about him. What is predictable about him is that he's going to be unpredictable. So there's going to be a whole lot of changes to the extent I was reading a few Chinese sites and some hardline Chinese sites, and 90% of their headlines pop into Trump, and it has caught their mind for whatever reason it is. There are huge implications for the ongoing conflicts in Russia, Ukraine, and also West Asia. Okay, but that is part of the reason, part of the larger issue. What has come through in this election is that USA is still the most consequential country in the world. You might say it's declining, but the reaction from the world on this election doesn't suggest so. Everyone is making his calculations, what will happen to me, right? It is not that it doesn't matter what happens in USA. Okay, and it's still, after all this talk of decline, which we've heard for the past maybe a decade or so, is the fact that here is a country where the people have decided who is to be the president, and they've been able to look through the narratives, whichever way they are. And they've said, look, we want this man, irrespective of the fact that he's a convicted felon, he's got cases against him, he's controversial, everything. They said, nothing doing. We are looking at this man and his policies and his ideas. He's the right man to take the country forward. Truly speaking, this is what is, to a large extent, democracy is all about. Okay. The next thing, which is very, what's so significant about these elections were that this election was fought with social media as the main platform to garner votes and conduct the election process and all that. The mainstream media proved the dud, as has been the case over the elections which have been conducted through the year in most countries. That's the predictable part. But uh, what is the different thing here is that the election at one stage or at one level has been won by old time methods of door to door canvassing, leaflets out, nukkad meetings and things like that, right? So it offers us new set of lessons and how democracy is evolving, how it's coping with modern times, yet remaining old. There are lessons for this, I think, the world over, right? And of course, it has domestic and global implications from an American point of view. And I think from an Indian point of view, we have huge ramifications. Uh, with this kind of a background, I'd request General Gautam Murthy, sir, please start the ball rolling, give your views, and after that, we'll take it forward. All yours, sir.
Thank you, General Shankar. Good evening and Jai Hind to you. Good evening, my fellow panelists, my guru, Brigadier Arun Sehgal, and Ambassador Anil Trigunayat, all top experts. So, we are here to tell you and your audience, CASA and Gunner Shot, presenting this webinar to tell you as to what we think are the implications of this Trump presidency. Trump is going to become the 47th president of the United States, and it will have a significant implications on not only global politics, as General Shankar mentioned, on economics, and on the entire security dynamics. I'm not going to actually speak on what Trump 2.0 will have on the US itself, because in the US itself, and primarily, he got voted on that plank, which was anti illegal immigration, inflation, interest rates, tax cuts, the internal dynamics of the US. All this is going to be affected. But we shall try and focus on how his presidency is likely to reshape the international landscape. Insofar as foreign policy and global alliances are concerned, we are aware that Trump has put America first. He said it in his first presidency. His theme was MAGA, make America great again. Well, there are detractors who say America is already great, and as General Shankar mentioned, everyone is talking about it. America is the number one country. So when it's already great, what is there to make it greater? But then that is Mr. Trump's approach, which prioritizes US interests over all global cooperation. This would lead to result reduction in US engagement with all international organizations and treaties, which is similar to his first term. If you recollect, when he withdrew from the Paris Climate Accord and the Iran nuclear deal. But knowing how unpredictable it is, it's also possible that he could open up a channel with the Ayatollahs in the same manner as he did with Kim Jong un of North Korea. He's known to have reached out to Putin already, and Elon Musk was supposed to have been in on that call. And talking about Musk, just as an aside, he may have paid 44 billion for 44 billion for Twitter, which he now calls X. But see what he's got in the bargain. He's got the president of the United States in his favor or in the palm of his hand. So his administration, Trump's administration, may again seek to exit or renegotiate key agreements. And NATO, the effect on NATO is going to be, it's anyone's guess. He had already blamed NATO earlier. He says, my European partners are not paying up. Let them pay up. Let them spend this much 2% on defense. So he's been after them for a long time and he's going to make this come true. That is one thing. The other thing, aspect of his taking over is you're going to see a lot of geopolitical hedging. Nations may engage in, seeking new alliances and partnerships in response to perceived instability in the US foreign policy under Trump. So each one is looking to shore up his interests. Trump's rhetoric has often criticized US allies, I've told you, for not contributing enough for mutual defense costs. and this is likely to strain his relationship with NATO members and other partners. He will push for increased military spending from European nations, and he would likely reduce US troop presence abroad, particularly in Europe. Economically, trade policies, it's going to be protectionist. He has struck a huge blow to globalization in his first tenure, and now in the second tenure, we are likely to see global wars, which will affect supply chains and economic stability. I do not know whether China's most favored nation status is going to continue, but he is going to subject it to high tariffs, which would again lead to some retaliatory measures from Beijing and further escalate tensions. Tariffs from importing goods on China could reach about 60% or more in the automobile market, and some are saying it would touch 100%. This potential for increase in tariffs will disrupt international trade flows, not only affecting US China relations, but also impacting European exports to the US, particularly, as I mentioned, in automotive manufacturing. So you could see a realignment of trade partnerships. You could see a reordering of global supply chains. You could see the global GDP growth being impacted, maybe limited, but if its trade policies continue to be radical, countries that rely heavily on exports to the US will face huge economic slowdowns. But those who diversify their trade partnerships, they may mitigate some of the negative aspects. About the security implications, withdrawing from NATO, which he is often threatened, but I don't think it can happen. But certainly, it would embolden adversaries like Russia and China, who may support, who may perceive a weakened NATO. And East European nations, those who are concerned about Russian aggression, may fear that a Trump presidency could lead to reduced US support for Ukraine and the allies. Now, the particular implication on the Russia Ukraine war is what I'd like to just spend a minute on. Trump has previously expressed skepticism about the scale of US military and economic assistance to Ukraine, which has totaled about $108 billion since Russia's invasion in February 2022. His administration will seek to reduce the support, potentially altering the dynamics of this conflict significantly. This could leave Ukraine vulnerable, especially if aid is shifted from grants to loans, and that will place an additional burden. That is why perhaps Biden, the president is trying to get a 60 billion aid package through soon. Uh, they have already indications that Ukraine should forget about Crimea. I do not know whether uh, that is going to fructify, most probably because uh, Russia is already occupied Crimea and has been sitting there since 2014. We know that. Trump has claimed that he will resolve the Ukraine conflict within 24 hours, and moves, as I mentioned in my opening remarks, are already afoot, with Elon Musk on listening watch. JD Vance, in fact, his vice president elect has indicated that any resolution might entail creating a demilitarized zone along the current front lines. And if you recollect, we had discussed earlier, General Shankar, that when we discussed Ukraine, that what if it reaches a LOC or a LAC kind of situation, with Ukraine losing control over key regions like Crimea and, of course, parts of Donbas. Now, Ukrainian leadership will obviously resist. Some Europeans will also resist. But then who's going to pump in more money into Ukraine? We don't see a Trump administration pumping more money into Ukraine. Insofar as China is concerned, he's already been confrontational. In fact, it started during the Trump presidency because Biden had gone a little too close to China, and we knew what had happened. And Trump is not going to accept China's territorial claims in the South China Sea and its influence over Taiwan. So perhaps you're going to see an increased military presence in the region. But at the same time, we do not know because Trump, all said and done, as General Shankar pointed out, is a wild card. Insofar as the Israel war is concerned with the belligerents, Trump will continue his strong support for Israel. There's no doubt. Right now in Israel, also, there's a huge hardline support for what Netanyahu is doing, even firing his defense minister, further polarized the nation. But the hardliners and the Orthodox Jews are standing up to that and wanted Gallant out. So let us see what Trump does in West Asia, but he is likely to, there's hope that he's likely to bring the war to a close. Climate change, environmental policies, we all know what a second Trump presidency would entail, a rollback of the federal environment regulations, a renewed withdrawal from the international climate agreements like the Paris Accord, and this will diminish global efforts to combat climate change and could isolate the US from other countries. Trump's focus is on fossil fuel production. So you would likely to see an increased domestic energy output, but it would also widen the gap between US energy prices and those in Europe. So, in summary, a Trump presidency is likely to reshape the international global relations through either economic or security, and there are going to be great challenges for every country to negotiate it. More as we go on further, implications on India, etc. I would leave it to the ambassador and Brigadier Saigal to speak on it. Thank you, General Shankar.
Thanks a lot, sir. The issues which you have highlighted are uh, Mr. Trump will prioritize US interests. Nations will be forced to hedge because there's going to be a lot of change in the international relations. People will have to hedge with or against USA. There will be a realignment of trade and supply chains. Ukraine, you see a change of situation as we all see, but I dare say it's not going to be so simple. It'll have its own complications, and that is something which we'll have to see how it plays out. And I also feel that eventually India will have to figure somewhere in this equation with Russia and Ukraine in the long run. You did speak of Israel and Iran. What I'd like to highlight is, about Iran. Just 2 days back, in fact, today morning in the New York Times or one of those articles I read, where there's been an assassination attempt by Iran, some Iranian person who's been arrested against Trump. So this will just put the red flag against Iran in front of Trump. So that war I do see going a little ahead down the line. But let's see how things play out because this is too early. But these are the early indicators. Thanks for your views because a lot of interesting questions have come up. With this, Ambassador Trigunath, sir, all yours. Please take over.
Thank you, sir. And I fully agree with the assessment of General Murthy with regard to this. But I must say one thing is that possibly Trump would be, in his second term, be the strongest US president because he'll have Senate, possibly the Congress, popular support, and even judiciary on his side. So that will give him the kind of power that perhaps no other president exercised in at least recent decades. Uh, I also somehow feel that the way he's going and talking in the last year or so, one has noticed that he's becoming a bit more pragmatic and predictable. Uh, Not so much unpredictability anymore. There is this Project 2025 report that has been created and that very much lays out. The very first thing that he has done, and which is quite remarkable, all of us talk about the deep state. Now, the kind of reforms and uh, removal of corruption in this, in his 10-point plan that he has done, is quite significant, actually. And if he's able to do that, I think that a lot of uncertainty would perhaps be limited in that. So we need to also wait and see how it plays out. Uh, Today, Zelensky also called Trump, and during that meeting, also Elon Musk was there. And I think I was this morning only. I have returned from Russia. I participated in the Valdai Discussion Club, where President Putin was there day before yesterday for more than 4.5 hours, talking and answering all questions. And during one of the discussions from there itself, he congratulated President Trump. And two things he said about him. Of course, he spoke about several other presidents and his this thing, but mainly he said that I have great regard for this man because when he took the bullet and the way he got up and projected, that shows. So he said, I have started having great regard. Himself, a macho man, obviously, that is there. Secondly, he also mentioned that we have been hearing about these various proposals that he has made in the run up to the elections about the war. And I think that's what his words are. I think they need serious attention. And then now, of course, the talk is taking place. And he said the question, the moderator asked him, would you be ready to talk to him? So he said twice, yes, ready, ready. So that is something that Putin's side also must be weighing on it and the various kinds of situation. And I fully agree that irrespective of whatever becomes in the Russia-Ukraine, some kind of a demilitarized zone or a buffer zone or that, only place that is probably non-negotiable for him would be Crimea. They consider Crimea to be a part of it, was given by Khrushchev to that. So that also the claim otherwise, apart from the strategic significance that we all know about of this. Now, as far as Trump's own character is concerned, of course, that's not going to change. I have always believed that he's not a warmonger. He himself has said only, I think, during the couple of weeks back, when he was asked, he says, I'm not going to start a war. In fact, I'm going to stop wars. Now, that has been his basic thing. So, but being a bully by nature, he will obviously try to threaten, whether it's China, whether it's other countries, Iran, or whatever it is. But at the end of the day, he has this very transactional approach. And this transactional approach would possibly be used for whatever they call MAGA. Now, in fact, MAGA is probably an old thing. And as General Murthy and yourself, Shankar, you were saying that America is great again. What is there to make it great? He has changed it. He has made it into MAWA, make America work again. So this is that he is looking at. But he also realizes that as a superpower, United States is an overstretched superpower. It is unable to have its footprint and continue with the same thing. And that's where his effect on the Europeans for contributing 2% of the GDP has pretty much been a very successful attempt, actually. Even though he started it, it did not happen during this time, but they all have started contributing nearly 2% of the GDP for their own this thing. So I believe that he'll definitely try his best. What happens to Russia-Ukraine war? That is something we'll have to see, because Putin is, as of date, pretty committed to getting a decisive outcome. That's what we gathered from the meeting. But of course, nobody wants to continue for a war forever. I mean, if Trump tells him that you are spending $40 billion a month on your war, I mean, would you not like to settle it? It might be good for the Russians. But he also comes from something very different. And that is that by wooing Russia, he could create a wedge between Russia and China. Once again, I would like to tell you that this question was asked directly by a Chinese think tank. Because Chinese are worried, no doubt about it. This was pretty evident. And I was surprised that one of the Chinese think tanker, day before the results were out, mentioned that I can predict that Kamala Harris is going to win. Then that did not happen, of course. Then, there was this famous cephalologist or professor, Alan Lichtman. He had also said it, he was never wrong. He was asked to change his views, which he refused to change. He was again in favor of Kamala Harris. It did not happen. One thing we need to understand, like India, all the cephalogists, all the media machine, I think they need to go back to the basics and find their roots. Why all of them are now completely wrong and are unable to read the minds of the electorate. to begin with. So I think that he will definitely. I mean, I see that Iran will remain a trouble thing, but it is. We may not be surprised if we would like to review start the deal by completely reviewing it. He has already rejected it, so maybe it could be discussed with Iran. At the moment, he has threatened already Hamas that before he gets into the White House, all the hostages should be released. He has for the Americans already forced the Qataris to evict all the Hamas leaders from there, which is a tremendous pressure on the Hamas at the moment. On the other hand, he had also told Netanyahu, who was one of the first to congratulate him, but he told him that you better wrap it up before I enter the White House. Now, so he is keen on that. Moreover, how it will eventually play out will also depend on what kind of people he chooses. Right now, he has only Susan Wiles, who is his chief of staff, and there is a bigger role which is being given to Elon Musk, who will be overall supervising and probably this doing something on increasing the government efficiency, which is very important. Then, of course, Robert Kennedy. I mean, he's been given to make America healthy again. That kind of a Maha project. Now, those are the things they're going to be. Now, whether Mark Rubio or whoever becomes the foreign minister, state secretary, who becomes defense secretary, yeah. Yeah, so we'll have to look at it. All these, they will also have their own this thing. Now, what role Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, or all the big multi-billionaires will play in this whole thing will be because his presence in the discussions with the president gives you. Last time it was his daughter Ivanka who used to be mostly present. This time he has said none of his family members will be in the government, including Jared Kushner, who was his Middle East man. So I feel that in the Middle East we might see some changes taking place under his watch. He'll again try to get some kind of a deal because he thinks he's a great deal maker, and so that's what they're. Now, just briefly on India, I mean, I think that Prime Minister Modi's very quickly sent a message, then spoke to him as well. He also has been talking about Prime Minister Modi and India in general. He was quite foxed both by Texas and what happened in Ahmedabad. Both the rallies, I mean, these leaders in the West do not understand how hundreds of thousands of people can gather to cheer a leader. And that is something I think has given him, because he loves in bigger the beautiful, that kind of a thing. So, secondly, he's from the strategic perspective, in China remains his main adversary. Through tariff wars, there won't be, in my view, a real war, because he'll also force Taiwan to add up more to its own security, means buy more arms from the United States, rather than they pumping in a lot of money into Taiwan, which the Democrats have done in the past. So I see, as far as our relations are concerned, I think that he'll continue to pitch in a lot of things that are still stuck up with regard to transport technology, GEL, HL, and all on which we are now invoking the penalty clauses. I think those will be expedited, in my view. And one more thing, if he's able to somehow control the Russia-Ukraine war, that will give us a lot of leeway to operate around. That means you will not have to bother about sanctions on Russia. You will not have to bother about the other constraints that come onto us, except the one which will continue to be in Chabahar port. So I think that is something that we'll have to convince him. He is the one who last time stopped it. Then, of course, immigration issue, I think we'll have to continue to. But only problem is that we have, I believe, that a large number of Indian illegal immigrants as well. Now, what happens to them? They'll definitely be going after them. So that will be one of the other issues. I think the immigration and the visas, basically for professionals, because we are trying to continue to push for migration and mobility dimension. And how will it play out? That remains to be seen. Of course, Dr. Jaishankar has also, on these lines, spoke about 4 or 5 points which he feels will work. Then you will have a few Indians who are pitching to be in the administration. Name of Kash Patel for CIA chief and all that are being flagged. Nikki Haley is looking for something. Tulsi Gabbard is another one. Vivek Ramaswamy is another one. So these will be high-profile people in the of Indian origin in this. Besides, of course, the wife of J.D. Vance will be there. So I'll leave it here. We'll just take it on question answer, sir. Thank you.
That is very interesting points you brought out. Um, Strongest US president, we all said it. The interesting thing is you spoke a more pragmatic and a predictable Trump is coming. I think he's also a cooler Trump who's very focused this time, unlike before. When he first came, we didn't know what his focus was. At least now he's very clearly put out what his focus is. Okay, the Russia-US relationship is set to change. If this changes, so will the Russia-China relationship change, and automatically the Russia-USA-China relationship will change. Where India fits in this, we'll have to see. We'll discuss it, right? Yeah. The interesting thing which you brought out is that USA is an overstretched superpower, and it'll be in his interest and in US interest to contract it. And to that extent, he will be very interested in finishing one or two conflicts at least. Okay. A lot depends on the team which comes up because without the team, nothing much can get transacted. So we'll have to see how the team comes out. And you did mention about, his problems with China in in the first term. We must remember that he has, even now, whatever he has said goes largely against China to a large extent. And we should not also forget that it was during his term that the Quad came up. The Quad didn't exist before that. And it was he who promoted Quad. And when Quad came up in the first initial stages, it was more, it was very clearly more of a military alliance or a military partnership than a transactional trade related partnership. As you spoke, sir, I did pick up a few tweets from X on the in US-China relationship and the view from China. This is interesting. I would like everyone to hear, and I would like it once I finish, Brigadier Arun Sehgal to cover this issue. There's this gentleman called Huang Jing. He's from the Shanghai International Studies University. Right? What he says is both Donald Trump and Vance have publicly stated that the USA should join hands with Russia to counter China. If such a situation arises, China's environment would deteriorate drastically. It's interesting. Then Wu Xinbo from Fudan University, he says US-China relations will experience significant fluctuations in the next 4 years with escalating tensions, intensified confrontations, and probably even a major crisis. And I could go on. There were 10 people who have commented, but I thought these two were pretty significant in the context in which we were talking. Uh, so there is going to be change. And like I said, there's a lot of apprehension in China. In fact, the maximum reactions I've seen on the net are from China. Uh, with this, sir, Brigadier Saigal, sir, all yours, please take over. Sir.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir, we can.
Okay. So everything, I mean, all the aspects of Trump administration and how it's going to be have been covered. But I don't look at things from my perspective. I look at issues from a broader geopolitical perspective, and I have named my remarks as "World According to Trump." Now, I have covered three aspects: the geopolitical order, the geoeconomic order, and the global power play. My perception is very simple. United States is a big power, major power. It's an offshore power. Please remember that. It's not. Number two is that it has to be part and parcel of the global system which is currently existing and which is being shaped not only by United States, but there are other equally significant players who are playing the role. So, to start point is if you look at the current geopolitical order, we are practically entering into bloc politics.
The fundamental part of this bloc politics is that we have the Western bloc, which is essentially Atlantic bloc, and which controls, which has a massive significance in Europe and astride the maritime domain of the global order. The next is the Eastern bloc, which is China, Russia, which is continentally dominated, which is trying to create a salience on the maritime domain, particularly in Indo-Pacific. And added to that is the global South, who is gaping at these two guys fighting amongst themselves, and all their actions are impacting their growth and their future. But the issue basically that comes about is that if this conflict of interest in the global play is going to continue, and I don't see any change taking place in a hurry, the perception that Trump can solve the Ukraine war, the perception that he can resolve issues with Russia in one go are very easily said. It's not going to happen easily. Russians have their own perceptions. Russians have their own perception on Ukraine. In fact, I was in a meeting with a senior Russian diplomat in Delhi, whose biggest concern was Ukraine going nuclear. It might look from our perspective some kind of a funny idea, but they are serious about these things. They are also looking at Dnieper as the line, and they are also looking to ensure that the future Ukraine cannot raise its head against or pose a threat or a challenge to Russia. So that there are number, and in fact there is a Russian analyst who have put 5 points to the possible uh, demands of Russia, which is apart from this include the fact is that the restoration of all sanctions, return of money, and also the fact is that they are saying Ukraine cannot be part of the NATO bloc or cannot get the guarantees. He can get the guarantees from Western powers, but they cannot be it cannot be utilized for stationing any weapon systems, etc., etc., etc. So the point is that it's not going to be easy for Trump to just pick up the line and tell Putin, "Yeah, I'm going to sort out the war." The second issue is basically is that how how much can Putin trust Trump? Second, what are the leverages Trump can have on the European allies? There is a problem taking place in Europe. Ambassador would probably knows much more than I do. There's a serious problem and a security problem. You know, England has promised equipment to Ukraine 3 months back, which has not been delivered. There are large number of items which are on the pipeline which have not gone to Ukraine. So Europe is re-evaluating its own security metrics. The fact that America under Trump can bully Europe forever, I think, is an over-conceited idea. If you read Elbridge Colby's etc.'s remark, who always pushing Europe for this, but the reality of the situation is the Europeans are now standing firm. They also realize that America is an offshore power. Any resolution of conflict of Ukraine will have an impact on European security, not the American security. Please understand this logic. Now we come to China. As far as China is concerned, there are two intrinsic factors. One is, as far as China is concerned, the US presence for the Chinese is a constraint in China of achieving its global objectives. As long as United States remains presence in Indo-Pacific and has a strong military presence in Indo-Pacific, China will remain a continental power and remain an Asia-centric power. It cannot become a global power. For China to become a global power, it has to deal with the American challenge. And I do not see under any circumstances Chinese giving into that challenge. Number two, Chinese are aware, and so are the Americans are aware, this whole nonsense about 100%, 600% duties and all, he can do it for a while, but he realized, like it happened last time, that there is a limit to it. He will suffer. Already, Europeans are thinking of re-evaluating supply chain constraints against and countervailing duties against the Chinese on EVs and other issues. See, the whole issue will evolve about how the economic order is pans out, and also the fact is that how the perceptions of that economic orders are on the either side. There is no doubt that the Chinese are suffering because of the kind of technological and economic duties that have been imposed on them. But it is also a fact that when you look at the global economies, just to give you small figures, the total GDP of the BRICS countries, as I said, the 9 BRICS countries I'm talking about, not the partners, is 32% of the global GDP. And as far as G7 is concerned, their total GDP is only 27%. Please take cognizance of that. Please also note that the entire Asian landmass and Asia economically is more dependent on China than it is dependent upon United States. With Americans walking out of TPP, the only thing that they have is the Indo-Pacific system, and
Economic
also
forums.
Indo-Pacific Economic Forum, and that's it about all. And there is nothing in it. So you now note how the Indonesians are playing their cards, how the investments are coming over there. Now there is another element which has come out in the BRICS partners, 13 partners that they have created, 4 are Asian major economies. These are Vietnam, Indonesia, Malaysia, and Thailand. Now, with India and China being over here, and these 4 economies are around here, if they start doing business, which is intended to do under the 3-point program which the BRICS have tried to create, it, which basically includes partners, clear as a new clearing house, and thirdly is the new insurance system that they're trying to put in place. And if they start doing bilateral trade, it will, according to the analysts, will have initially 5 to 10, 15% impact on this. But going ahead, it could impact about 30 to 35% impact in the next 5 to 10 years on the de-dollarization perspective. Please also note in the BRICS, almost all the major energy countries are there. The BRICS with Russia, India, and China have a very strong economic strength. So therefore, when we are talking about Trump doing this and Trump doing that, the combined leverage of these 3 countries, although they are not strategically or politically aligned, I understand that. But if you are looking at their political alignments, or if they get together, their have to deal with the United States of America is much higher than the Americans have to deal with them. So this is something which we need to take cognizance of, and we tend to sort of glance over these issues. It's not true. It's not true. So problem for India in this, basically, I'm talking about now the realignment system in the 2 block system, because India is an interesting country. India has played its cards very well. It's a very important player, global player. India is in both the blocks. India is in the Eastern Bloc. India is in the Western Bloc. The question is, how do we play our cards? We are going to come under pulls and pressures. There's something which we need to take cognizance of. I'm not saying what we should do or what not do. This is not the time to do it, but I can spell it out subsequently. But the point is that this is an issue that we need to be cognizant of, that If we are going to play the politics of our interest-based politics, I do not call them as strategic autonomy, because there is nothing known as strategic autonomy from my perspective. Our interest-based politics, and we follow our interest-based policy, we have a lot of leeway, but we'll also need to do a lot of tightrope walking. One of the elements of the India-China Accord has been, whether we like it or not, unstated element has been that we will go back to an improved bilateral relations. An improved bilateral relation, i.e., means that we will have more trade, opening up of our economic systems, etc., etc. And here again, there is a problem area. Please try and understand. You can de-risk from China. You can get investments from A, B, and C. But please remember, those A, B, and C countries who is going to invest in your country have a back-end connectivity to China. Somewhere down the line, the supply chains are interlinked. And that's where we'll have to look at. As for my information, we have been doing business with the Chinese, not going because of the press note 3 impositions, not going directly to China, but we have been dealing with the Chinese in Singapore, in Hong Kong, and making our deals through whatever we wanted to do. So the larger point is the global geoeconomic and geopolitical orders are so intertwined. In my view, the United States' ability to singularly shift or change these issues, I'm afraid, in my view, it is overplayed. United States does not have the capacity or the capability. And also the fact is that if United States tries to impose itself on Europe, then the Europeans will also start looking at it as it becomes a new bloc to push for advantage against the Americans. Then there is going to be a much more bigger point of problem areas. So this is one issue. The second is India-US relationships. Fundamental point, Trump has been good for us. Ambassador said so. General Gautam Murthy said so. Very true. During Galwan and during this thing, they were very much forthcoming and they supported us quite a lot. It's absolutely true. It's also true that all the foundational agreements that we have signed them through Mr. Trump's tenure. We also signed the STA one during Mr. Trump's tenure. But please understand one thing. Technology is crown jewels. Technologies are not shared easily, and they cannot be shared by having a Jappi Puppy in Ahmedabad Stadium. They are hardcore strategic decisions based on what is to be done. If technologies are going to be shared by us, then there will be payoffs. We thought that I said program, good thing, with Sullivan talking to Doval's Hub and all is all very good, etc. But nothing has come out of it, except for small little programs which have come up, which is basically nothing. We are already, as everybody is aware, we are fighting over the F414 supply chain.
Engines.
We are not getting 414 engines, and we are not getting 404 engines. And 404 is a real problem. 404 is a real problem because they are not being made. And therefore, there is actually a problem. It's not because the Americans are not wanting to give you. The Americans simply do not have the capacity to give it to you. So you have to be very careful on all these issues. I keep saying this to people that who say, we are a strong technology partner with this, we'll do that. Quantum. What is happening in quantum? What is happening in underwater technology? I will tell you that small little masthead antenna, which we have to get from Japan, it is now 5 years that we have not got that masthead antenna from Japan. So the issue is, it'll be good. With Trump being transactional, one of the important things would be we can negotiate a price. And once we negotiate a price, we can negotiate the technological developments. One of the price which I personally feel, which is likely we might be asked to pay, is that India becomes an incubator or a forward incubator of American essential supply systems. In that, they say like the MRO contract they are signing with us on the ships and the aircraft tomorrow. They will might ask us to manufacture those elements of ammunition or other elements in India, which like we are doing it for spare parts for, I mean, other parts of the Apaches and Boeing, etc. 155 millimeter ammunition factories. If we can, if they might ask us to do that, that's something which we have to take cognizance of. Do we want to do that? We don't want to do that. We have to develop, continue to say, dependabilities amongst ourselves. And sadly speaking, sirs, there are not so many dependability. We have a lot in the pipeline. We have a lot of good juppy puppy. We got a lot of good essential, I mean, ideas, but we do not have much to show. So if we can push Trump through a transactional structure of his policy to invest in India, that will be a good thing. Thank you. I'll stop here. On China, I've covered that, but if you still want me to cover, I'll cover.
No, we'll talk about it later.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks a lot, sir. I think you've given a different viewpoint about the whole affair. That there'll not be much change in bloc politics. Like I said earlier, it's very at the outset itself. While a lot is being said, how this change and transition takes place will have to be seen. It's not going to be easy. It's going to take time, and it might not be as we think. In any case, I go with you. The Trump is not coming with a wand to wave and everyone's going to stop, because everyone's interests are at their own way important to them. A lot of the geo-economic order which you spoke is actually frozen. It's not going to change so fast. So how that will happen is something which we have to factor in, and how to that extent, in the past 1 decade, America has been sidelined to a large extent from this geo-economic order in many places, right? So to that, we have to see how we're going to go through. And what Brigadier Sehgal has said about India needing to take its interest-based politics into geopolitical arena is very important, because getting hold of technologies one way or the other is I think very critical. And in that, Mr. Trump with his transactional approach might be good, might not be good. But one point which Brigadier Sehgal made, I would like to put across. While we say we want to be a power which is strategically autonomous, friends to all, enemy to none, and all that, if you want technology from anyone, you have to make certain commitments. There has to be a pro quid quo. Otherwise, no one is going to give you technology. I'll give you a very small example, which we did incidentally, way back in 2016. When we got the M777 gun, I insisted that we should get the titanium-related technology to India. Otherwise, this gun isn't coming here. And I said, I want this to be made because it's a matter of your supply chain and all has to start and finish in India. They agreed to that. The pro quid quo was that India has to be the start of the supply chain, global supply chain for M777. It cuts both ways, right? Which means that if you are the start point of the global supply chain for M777, you're economically better off. And you get your own strategic independence or autonomy, whichever way you like, and you have the technology. But the price which you have to pay is you're part of a supply chain. It's not that you might call it a global supply chain, but the supply chain goes only to 4 countries: USA, Canada, Australia, and India. So when we talk of India or what shall I say, Canada, all these factors come in. There are a lot of other hidden layers and relationships which do come to the surface. So I thought that is very important. That a very important thing which Brigadier Sehgal brought up. Right. We've gone through the whole thing. I'll now switch to a few simple questions, but I think they're interesting questions. Well, Gautam Murthy, sir, you spoke a lot about what Mr. Trump outlined in his domestic agenda and all that. My question is, will he be able to come out of it and get to international issues, or will he be stuck in that whole story of his, and keep going about within himself and relegate the international issues to a sideline? Can't hear you. You have to unmute yourself.
Still muted, yeah. Huh?
No, am I okay now, sir? Am I audible?
Yeah, you're okay now.
Okay. So the the issue of Trump saying America first, he's very clear in his mind that he's got a lot of domestic issues to tackle, and therefore he does not want to be distracted by international issues. One of the reasons that he's calling for peace, he's ensuring peace so that his focus remains on his country. He's got his constituency to care for. Trump supporters, although there have been an increased Latino supporters, black supporters, but essentially it is the white male whose support he has relied on. And the white American male, apart from the on the two coasts where all your universities are, the top universities of the world are, and where they're more learned and everything else, and there's more migration, legal migration, and they understand the world much better. The rest of white America is focused on itself. American channels, FM radio that we've all visited the US, we've seen that most of your FM stations are on the weather at best and of what is going on within that town, within that county, and within the United States. You see the newspapers, foreign news is never on the first page, very rarely unless it's a major event. So, and the ambassador will bear with me, sir, that Trump will insist on looking at local issues first rather than global issues. He's just going to say, go get them, boys, and that's it. You know. So he'll have his team handling sorting this out. He'll just lay out his vision and the team sorts it out. He's not going to get involved very directly unless it's at the absolute top level. That's my reading of the situation. Ambassador Anil Trigunite could perhaps
Yeah,
add to that.
I'll go with you. I'll just throw a point in this that look, while he is fully integrated or fully focused on his internal issues, it's a matter of a question still. It's an open question. How much will he be able to achieve in this? And if he gets lost in his own detail, and there's nothing much he's going to make America great again, because making America great again is not largely, of course, it uh, presages a lot of domestic stability, but making America great again has got a huge external element. Triguna, sir, your views on this?
Muted,
You're
muted.
muted.
Sir, I agree with Jalal Murthy on this. Americans generally are geographically very blind. They are mainly concerned about that. And Trump's whole campaign has essentially been focused on addressing these domestic issues, and there are plenty of them. A lot of them are controversial issues. Despite that, he has won hands down. That's a remarkable achievement. That also shows the greater malaise in the U.S. Political system, that how it is playing out. The fact that he has had people, Latinos, despite his stance on the immigration issues, the Indians, the Arabs, and Muslims, all increasing their vote share towards Trump, knowing too well his policies, at least in the areas of concern to them, is definitely something which is remarkable in many ways. So I think that no doubt that America is the only hyperpower today, whether we might say whatever it is declining or so. So they are also trying to deflect a notion that China is going to catch up much faster from them. And that's why they will try to, whichever way possible, I'm quite sure, try to reduce the pace of growth of China. That is something would be in their strategic positioning of the United States, because that's the only country they're really fearful of taking over. Now, in that economy, Trump claims that it was doing very well during his time. So, employment, economy, all those issues are very important, inflation control. And if you keep on pumping money into this, and this is the most indebted country in the world. I mean, the $33 trillion of debt recently, which was projected, and every month what was coming, $1.6 trillion that need to be paid. That is something that is a very big challenge for any leader in the country, and Trump will be faced with that. So, how do you create the public expenditure inside? His approach has been in the past to attract more and more American companies to come back into the US, make USA as a manufacturing or the technology development hub and place. Now, that's where there might be a little opportunity for us. If he succeeds in that, the companies that will be looking at China plus one, and if we play our cards well, that so far only the ASEAN countries, mostly even Mexico and others, have benefited from it compared to us. So that is one of the opportunities. And as Brigadier Sehgal was saying very clearly, that we'll have to try to become a manufacturing, technology, protesting, or whatever, in every which way, a hub for this, which will be a complementarity of sorts. Then only we can benefit a great deal. Otherwise, we'll end up just simply being a market. I mean, that is an issue that will need to work out. But I don't see that USA withdrawing either from the Middle East or from the Indo-Pacific. In fact, more so, it will continue to remain engaged. Now, BRICS and other organizations definitely have a much bigger role of playing balance of power and balance of interests. But at the moment, one does not witness the great desire on the part of these countries to create an alternative, complete alternative, but something that could add on to, that could help, at least for now. I mean, China may be hoping that BRICS will eventually become its bloc, or for that matter, Russia. But things are still in a flux, and there is a lack of confidence. There is a lot of work, a lot of talk that is happening about this, that we are so much of the GDP and this and that. But there are a lot of, I would say, shaky grounds at the moment because of the nature of the global churn that is taking place. One does not know what happens tomorrow. I mean, we are also on the verge of with by default on a third world war that can happen in no time. Everything else, all equations will go haywire in that case. So that is also a possibility, because if the war's not ended, both these wars have the capacity to go berserk. So I think that we'll have to be a little cautious in our assessment of this, and try to save that we stay out of the trouble. That's the only thing I would say.
Thank you, sir. I think you put a lot of issues in focus. My only short point is, if Trump gets stuck inside USA and starts looking inward, right, the problems in the outside world will increase. So he will be forced at some point of time to look outside. Otherwise, make America great again won't happen. That's the short point. Then the issue, a significant point which you did bring out of BRICS. Uh, the three things have happened in the recent past which are of significance. One is the BRICS momentum, or the way it is shaping up, as Brother Sehgal brought out fully, the grain exchange and the way you exchange currencies and all that has got tremendous scope. The second thing is the India-China detent, which is setting in. It will change a lot of equations. There's no doubt. Everything is in its embryonic stage. And the third is Trump's arrival on the scene, right? All these three things are going to have an effect. I think the fallout of this will come out in a couple of months. We'll know how the cards are stacked. It's too early for any of us to even predict what's going to happen. But I think we could get a sense that we should be in for a period of tremendous change. And that change is on the cards. So that is where I leave it. Uh, the question I'll pose to Brigadier Saigal, sir, is this, and this is something which a nice question which has come up from Akash. I'll take that. Donald Trump has good relations and dynamic with both Vladimir Putin and Narendra Modi. Which way would the geopolitics, global geopolitics head? Where would Z fit in the new equation? I'm asking you this because we've had a lot of discussion on the global quadrilateral which was emerging. And do you see something getting affected on that with this new development with Trump coming back?
No, I mean, absolutely correct. But you see, again, I like to say two things. On your specific question, there is no doubt Putin and Donald Trump have a good relationship. Trump will push for a transactional bargain, which will bring about a closure or bring about a reduction or bring about a open up the way to ceasefire kind of a situation in Ukraine. It was going. That's on the cards. The problem is with the terms and conditions of that happening, and what will be the impact of that in Europe. Europe is not in a good state at this particular point in time. The second thing is it cannot happen that US and Russia get into a nice love affair and try and throw China into the in the boiling water. It's not going to happen that way. There are far too many complementarities between the Chinese economy and the Russian economy. Russians are dependent on China. China is dependent on them. It's not going to happen that way. And in any case, when we come to start looking at the things called crinks and all, you know what I talk about. Crink is China, Russia, India, sorry, Iran and North Korea, and how they are trying to balance in East Asia the balance of power through various exercises, etc. The whole idea is, and then there is an Arctic issue which is going to come up somewhere down the line. There are intrinsic conflicts of interest over here. How we going to manage those conflicts of interest is something which is we need to do some analysis about. And in fact, this evening's discussion, I'm a net analyst. I do net assessments. My basic job is net assessment. I'm going to launch for myself uh, and a net assessment on how these whole things are going to shape up. First, it'll be a broader issue. Then I start looking at it much more. And the issue I'm talking when we talking about breaks and all we talking about all these issues, yes, they are totally in embryonic stage, totally they say. But important point to note is that in this whole dynamics, what is happening is that the countries which are unhappy with the multilateral system which is existing today and the kind of sanctions, the unilateral sanctions Americans continue to impose, they continue to use the multilateral system to their advantage. People are getting fed up with it. I mean, of course, the question basically is if I have to make a deal with Brazil, why the hell it should go to the New York stock exchange and I should pay percentage to the Americans for making a deal with Brazil? I mean, this is as simple as that. It's true. It's early. It's not going to come about early. And one point more, which I forgot, which is important from my perspective, is the militarization of Quad. Now, this is another area where we will have to face some headwinds. We are very comfortable, very happy in the current system of Quad, which is public goods oriented Quad, which has got nothing security. We are not comfortable with securitization of Quad primarily because the balance of weight of the Quad is 3+1, three allies plus one. So we are left out of this whole game, and there is no intrinsic security guarantees which we get as a part of a military securitization of Quad is concerned. So this is what I say. I mean, so my take is that the it is not going to happen so easily. Things are going to take time, and I strongly believe that United States, which has to tackle these internal issues first, will be will and most interesting part about the United States governance system is that the politics are all internal of United States of America. The international security and foreign policy and diplomacy is left to the three institutions: the State Department, National Security Council, and the DoD, Department of Defense, with very little scrutiny within the country. There is scrutiny within the Congress and all, of course, as because the bills have to pass through. But people of United States are hardly any cognizance of that because they are sitting pretty in an isolation, far away from the world, and they and like you all rightly said, they they hardly get any inputs of what's happening globally. So these issues are left to these gentlemen who then mess up or they don't mess up is something
Mhm.
which we are seeing right now, both in Israel and Palestinian issue, and also in Ukraine.
Thanks, sir. One question to Ambassador. Sir, Trump brought about the Abraham Accords, brought peace and all that. He was the author of all this. And now the new West Asian order has changed. How do you see both these balancing out, or where do you think he will take it? Because with what is happening, as we were talking, it came out that, Qatar has almost kicked Hamas out. Officially, it's coming out. That they're not going to broker the Gaza peace settlement and all that. So how do you see this happening? Because after all, you've done a lot of uh, study on West Asia and you've written a book on West Asia. How do you see this going forward?
Sir, I feel that Trump, the primary or fundamental policy of the United States is the security of Israel. That's the bottom line.
Yes.
At the same time, the rest of the issues is that they wanted to create this Abraham Accords again as a precursor to ensure the Israeli security. That was another thing because they were trying to branch off into the Indo-Pacific. So that's what was the basic objective was. And Biden administration tried to take it to the next level by hoping that Saudi Arabia will become a part of it, which they nearly went there. And in my view, that was one of the biggest triggers for the Hamas attacks of October 7th. Now, Trump definitely would like to see that more countries join the Abraham Accords. But at the moment, whether it is Abraham Accords, whether it is Saudi Arabia's is, desire to be seen as part of it. Now, all of them are looking at a possibility, and the Saudi Crown Prince was one of the first to also talk to Trump, and Jared Kushner's fund has the maximum funding from the Saudi fund also. So, if he is a transactional person, he will once again like to try to bring about this. But he has also said one thing to uh, Netanyahu that Gaza carnage must stop. He has told that. So what he is right now trying is in the next 3 months or 2.5 months till 20th January, these people have to do whatever they want to do until then. And I think that this is a carte blanche that he has given to Netanyahu. Netanyahu is the most elated leader today thinking that. But I think that if he, of course, brings about, let us say, Brian Hook to be the Secretary of State or in defense something, then we can safely assume that the anti-Iran thing will continue, and his efforts to bring about the Arab countries into that fold will be there, and I think the Arab countries will not mind it.
Thank you, sir. I think over the past 1 hour, 15 minutes, we've had a fantastic discussion on the various aspects of the new Trump, presidency, which is going to unfold in front of us. These are early days, but they're clear indications as to where we are going. And we'll get back on Gunner Shot and CASA